Plessy v. Ferguson was an 1896 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court that confirmed the principle of separate but equal and minority segregation. The case began in Louisiana in 1892. Homer Plessy agreed to be arrested to test the 1890 law establishing whites-only train cars. Although he himself was 1/8 black and 7/8 white, he was still legally required to sit in the colored car of the train. The judge at the trial was John Howard Ferguson. He found Plessy guilty of refusing to leave the white car. Plessy appealed to the Supreme Court of Louisiana, which upheld Ferguson's decision. In 1896, the Supreme Court of the United States heard Plessy's case and found the law constitutional. Plessy paid the fine for the offense, but the case renewed black oppositions to such laws. The Plessy decision set the precedent that separate facilities for blacks and whites were constitutional as long as they were equal. The separate but equal doctrine had already been extended to cover many areas of public life, such as restaurants, theaters, restrooms, and public schools. Not until 1954, in the equally important Brown v. Board of Education decision, would the separate but equal doctrine be struck down. From the 1880s into the 1960s, a majority of American states enforced segregation through Jim Crow laws. From Delaware to California and from North Dakota to Texas, many states could impose legal punishment on people for consorting with members of another race. The most common types of laws forbade intermarriage and ordered business owners and public institutions to keep their black and white clientele separated. Here are some examples of some of the various Jim Crow laws. Buses. All passenger stations in the state operated by any motor transportation company shall have separate waiting rooms or space and separate ticket windows for the white and colored races. Alabama. Railroads. The conductor of each passenger train is authorized and required to assign each passenger to the car or the division of the car when it is divided by a partition designated for the race to which such passenger belongs. Alabama. Education. The schools for white children and the schools for Negro children shall be conducted separately. Florida. During World War II, for many African Americans, the war offered an opportunity to get out of the cycle of crushing rural poverty. Blacks joined the military in large numbers, escaping a decade of depression and tenant farming in the South and Midwest. Yet, like the rest of America in the 1940s, the armed forces were segregated. The Army accepted black enlistees but created separate black infantry regiments and assigned white commanders to them. The Army Air Corps' Black Fighter Wing was completely separate, training at an all-black university at Tuskegee, Alabama. The Navy segregated Negro units and gave them the most menial jobs on ships. And the Marines, at least initially, didn't even accept African Americans. At every training base, black and white soldiers were kept apart. But in the chaos of war, segregation broke down. It's hard to keep the races apart when both are being attacked. When black, Hispanic, and Native American soldiers returned from the war, they found a country that still did not grant them full rights, but a movement for expansion of the civil rights had been born. Some black soldiers who had left farm jobs in the South decided not to return home. Instead, they moved to cities looking for work that was similar to what they had learned in the armed forces. This movement represented an intensification of the black migration that began around the turn of the century. The Civil Rights Movement was a series of worldwide political movements for equality before the law that peaked in the 1960s. In many situations, it took the form of campaigns of civil resistance aimed at achieving change by nonviolent forms of resistance. In some situations, it was accompanied or followed by civil unrest and armed rebellion. The process was long and tenuous in many countries, and many of these movements did not fully achieve their goals, although the efforts of these movements did lead to improvements in the legal rights of previously oppressed groups of people. Martin Luther King was a great American who worked for civil rights in the United States in the 1950s and 60s. He fought for the rights of African Americans, and many people, blacks as well as whites, supported him. Martin Luther King saw how badly black people were treated, and during the 1950s he became involved in the civil rights movement. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Martin Luther King, Jr. On December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks, an African-American seamstress, left work and boarded a bus for home. As the bus became crowded, the bus driver ordered Parks to give up her seat to a white passenger. Montgomery buses were segregated, with the seats in the front reserved for whites only. Blacks had to sit in the back of the bus. But if the bus was crowded and all the white-only seats were filled, black people were expected to give up their seats. A black person sitting while a white person stood would never be tolerated in the racist South. But Rosa had had enough of such humiliation and refused to give up her seat. The bus driver then had her arrested. Martin Luther King Jr. heard about Rosa Parks' brave actions and launched a boycott on Montgomery buses. The 17,000 black residents of Montgomery pulled together and kept the boycott going for more than a year. Finally, the Supreme Court intervened and declared segregation on buses unconstitutional. Rosa Parks and the boycotters defeated the racist system, and she became known as the mother of the civil rights movement. The major outcome of the Montgomery bus boycott was that it helped lead to racial equality across America. Because many people protested and didn't use the Montgomery buses, the bus companies were losing lots of money. In the end, the law in Montgomery was changed, allowing black people to sit anywhere in the bus, not just in the back.